Hello and welcome back to another Friday night for another episode of Not Your Average Globetrotter. I am Rafael di Furia, back at it again to talk a bit more about living abroad, life abroad, Italian dual citizenship, and a little bit more of those other subjects that are related to all of this whole living abroad stuff. Tonight, though, I specifically wanted to get into a discussion that maybe relates a little bit more towards a certain subset of people that might be more in that digital nomad space, or even if they're not nomadic, but working remotely. And this is something that over the past year has definitely become much more normal for many of us, something much more considerable. I remember having the discussion with a number of people ahead of everything that's happened over 2020 and 2020 part 2 about working remotely, because many jobs these days realistically aren't tied to a specific position. Yes, maybe being in a particular location can be very convenient for the individual worker, or maybe if you're working as part of a team, or if you have clients, being close by in some cases really can be very nice. But if you are a freelancer, then this might change a little bit. I recently took part in an online discussion, kind of in a semi-open forum, talking about my experience living abroad. And one person who came up to ask a question asked about, well, what's actually it like to balance working with other Americans or people from around the world, because this person was thinking about moving from the United States to Italy. And this is something that I receive a lot of emails about and a lot of questions about on a very regular basis, especially since everything has been going on this past year. And there are many benefits to having this type of work life, but there are definitely some drawbacks, and I think it's important to explore those drawbacks. And so that's what we're going to do in this episode. And the first benefit, let's just start out on a high note. One of the biggest benefits of being able to work from home is not necessarily having to get dressed up, or at least having that be an option, because maybe there will be some times where, hey, you know, it's nice to put on a button-up shirt and a jacket or whatever the equivalent may be that you prefer to wear for your job. But there will be those occasions when you can just enjoy the day in your pajamas, in sweatpants, or even theoretically no pants. But that's up to you. You do you. You decide how you want to live your life. I know I can say I've done a few interviews in sweatpants. That's about as far as I'll go personally. But maybe I think one of the first places that's worthwhile starting off with would be visas and taxes. Let's start out with the visa part, though. When talking about this subject, country to country, it will very much change what you're able to do and how you're able to live your life, or even if you're able to live there, period. At this point in time in Italy, there is not a really great visa that opens up the system and becomes very friendly, like maybe someplace like where you might be able to go and live and work in Bali, or even in Estonia. And the programs that they have in Estonia for the digital nomad are very interesting to look at, even from a financial standpoint. We're not going to get into that too much in this video, but talking specifically about Italy, yes, you do have a self-employment visa, but it's not easy to get. And for many people who are thinking about working remotely, they are thinking about working for a company and transitioning into a new lifestyle that would allow them to keep their job that they maybe already have, but do it in maybe a little bit of a nicer location, maybe on the beach someplace. And that might actually lead to a problem that we'll talk about later about actually staying connected. But even if you're coming to Italy and you're looking at maybe something like the elective residency visa, basically Italy's equivalent of a retirement visa, in that situation, you're not allowed to work. You're not allowed to get anything done pretty much, and you'll have to pay even for your own health care. So from my understanding of it, that type of visa is really meant for a person maybe who's getting a monthly pension or earning something with a payout that they're not actively working on. That's really who it's meant for. But when we're talking about the self-employment visa, this becomes a different sort of situation, and there's a lot of hoops that you have to jump through. And I can say, out of the people that I've been in touch with who are interested in it, I've known more people who have not been approved than who have been approved. So that will be the question. If you're coming to Italy and you're going to be a dual citizen expat, then I think this, of course, changes the situation because this allows you to live and reside in Italy without any restrictions. Or if you hold some other European passport, whether that's your only passport or this would be one of your multiple passports, 2 or more that you might have or might not have, then that is also something to take into consideration. But when talking about taxes, this is something that will change depending on where you are and depending on your nationality. If you're an American, then good luck to you and the Red Sox, because that will be a whole lot of fun, the most fun you'll never want to have. No, I'm not jaded. But really though, it is annoying to be an American living abroad, and this is something that for many people living abroad causes them to think that maybe with those little things here and there that pop up, at the end of the day, for the average person, it doesn't make that big of a difference. But for us normal human beings, going through these little things can add up and become quite costly, unfortunately, even if we're talking about just the basics of reporting and so on that you're supposed to do every year. But then if you're an American living in another country, you may have to consider various options about how you're getting paid, who you're getting paid by, and what type of pay it is and how you're accepting that payment. These will all be things that will affect your earning. And if you're earning a wage versus earning a royalty versus earning an income as a retiree, that is your pension. Because in Italy, this is something that theoretically also can be taxed. So this is something that's very important to consider if you are thinking about retiring to Italy. And then on top, in each country, there will be a different system to become legal to work within the nation. But in some place like Europe and specifically Italy, you might not only have to register your tax file here in Italy, but take that extra step of getting registered on the European system so that you can work with people from other European nations and actually do the job that you're supposed to do, even if you're working freelance, because that might be the other thing, that maybe in your country of origin, you have a job that does pay you a salary. But what I know some people do is that they will open up a freelancer tax file in their country, and that will be something that will cover them in that country that they are if they are trying to make sure that they stay above board, because there are people who don't stay above board and will circumvent those systems. And that's just a reality of the world that some people do this. One other thing that will affect what you're earning and what your taxes may have to be is where you're earning that money from. Are you earning that from your home country? Are you earning that from another country? Are you earning that money from another country while doing it in the country that you happen to currently be in? These are all various things, and this is one of the reasons why I never get into the taxes situation directly talking about dual citizen taxes, because for each individual and each individual situation, the subject is very complicated and changes drastically depending on your personal situation. So this is why until this point, I haven't gone into detail and very likely won't go into detail. Maybe if at some point there is an accountant who is very familiar with these subjects, then maybe I'll be able to welcome them on the channel at some point. But unfortunately, I haven't met somebody who is familiar enough with both the Italian and US systems that can comment on both. There's a lot of people who have a fair amount of knowledge of both systems, but I can't say I've found, or even one tax office, able to handle everything inside of their own firm. This is something that even if people ask me, hey, do you have somebody you can recommend me? And I don't have somebody I can recommend you to, maybe one for each of them and to kind of piece your own thing together. But that is a very different subject for a very different video. But another subject related to earning while you're living abroad, banking and conversion fees. The banking part, that's a little bit more simple. Depending on the country that you're in, you may or may not have a difficult time to actually get an account. You may or may not be allowed to get a bank account in the country where you are. And even here in Italy, you might have to jump through some extra hoops, especially if you're an American citizen. This is just one thing that, unfortunately, this is just life as an American living abroad. But the other piece of the puzzle that's very important to consider is the currency that you're earning your money in. Because if you're living in euros, but you're earning in dollars, or you're earning in baht, which would be very uncommon if you're living in the European Union, but just consider that maybe you're earning in another currency that's not in the currency of where you are, whatever that may be. There will be times where the currency conversion may favor your currency, but there may be other times where the currency conversion really doesn't. Or if you're coming from a country that has a very big difference between the currencies, then that might be a factor of life that really ends up weighing heavily upon your day-to-day living. I know even I have Brazilian friends who they do earn a living from Brazil working online, but the conversion rate I think is like between 5 and 7 to 1, like 5 to 7 reais to 1 euro. I want to say it's something like about 6 or so. So let's say about 6 reais to 1 euro. And even though there are some things here in Italy that are actually a lot less when it comes to the cost of living, it still can be a bit painful at the end of the month for these individuals because there is such a big difference between what they're earning and what they have to spend. Because what you're earning, you still have to go out and buy, technically, these euros to be able to use your money locally. Even if you are using your card from your country, depending on that card, you may also have some banking fees that come along with that. And there are various ways around this, but any way you go, whenever you're transferring money from one currency to another, you're always paying some sort of fee of some kind. And even if they say, oh no, you're not paying any fees, you're still paying a specific conversion rate, which probably will include a fee somewhere in there. But there are services like TransferWise, for example, which are probably one of the best options out there if you are looking to transfer money from yourself to yourself and to be able to move that money from one currency into another. Or I think they even have an account where you can have various currencies that you hold and even get different bank account numbers in these different places and be able to hold those currencies but then spend in others. It's something that I've been toying around with, kind of looking at, and I know a lot of people who use TransferWise and have been very happy with it, but it's not a service that I've used their accounts for, but I've definitely used it for some transfers. If I'm not mistaken, I do have a referral link down in the more info section below this video on YouTube if you want to learn a little bit more about that. But then one other thing that definitely has to do with the money that you're earning, and even to an extent, potentially the currency that you're earning in, is that in a country like Italy, being a freelancer, just in general, doesn't matter where you are on earth, can put you into some funny situations where maybe you don't have the most reliable income. And in a country like Italy, where I live, that could be something that will make life a little bit more difficult for you. And this is why in Italy, even opening up your own tax file in the end might be worthwhile, so that you can have some documentation to show at least some income coming in somehow. And maybe even with the company that you might be working with, if you are in that type of situation and you're not a freelancer, maybe to develop some type of freelancer relationship with them so that you can bill them as a freelancer rather than being one of their employees. And I don't know, don't ask me about the legalities of that or how that all works, because of course I'm not an accountant. You should definitely speak to one about that if you are considering doing that type of setup. But something here in Italy is that they often want to see at least a local contract or some type of proof that you do have money coming in and that you are able to actually pay that rent that you have committed to. On occasion, maybe you'll find an apartment where maybe they'll just say, hey, this person's an American or a Canadian or British. Maybe, yeah, they'll be fine. Don't worry about them. They've got the money. Don't worry about it. But you got to be careful also about those situations, because there can definitely be some negative sides to those types of relationships, but you never know. You might be able to get into a type of situation where you can just get into that apartment and have no questions asked, or very limited questions asked, just on a personal level, verbally, what is it that you earn? But what is more often the case in my experience, and from what I've heard from a lot of other people, is that they want to see something locally here in Italy, because if you don't pay your rent, they want to be able to access that money. And if you have a local job in here in Italy, they can theoretically go directly there and take directly from what you're earning. So that's one thing to consider if you're trying to find an apartment here. And of course, like I've said in other videos, this can be a very difficult part when trying to enter the loop into residency. An Italian residency is a very different concept than what most of us around the world would be used to, or at least those of us coming from North and South America. It's a bit of a different idea. But just before we get into the next subject here, I wanted to take a second to thank those of you who are the monthly patrons for helping to make content like this possible on a monthly basis. Thank you also very much for being a part of this and allowing me to continue with this project. But continuing with this episode, the next thing that is also very important to consider is your time, your schedule, and considering day and night versus maybe if you are working remotely in the country where your clients are or where your work is. And if you're coming from someplace like the East Coast of the United States, maybe it might be a little bit easier for you to mesh up those time schedules just because the time difference normally is about 6 hours between Italy and the East Coast of the United States. But now with daylight savings time, it's 5 hours, at least for these next couple of weeks, I guess. So that's also one thing that you do have to take into consideration is when the clocks change and that they change differently in different parts of the world. And even somebody asked me the question the other day, how is it when working with people on the other side of the world? What does that look like? How does that impact your schedule? And the easiest way for me to answer that question is, how attached to sleep are you? Because that will be something that if you are working with people on the other side of the world, your sleep schedule will definitely be impacted. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Maybe you might be actually able to get into the type of situation, if you happen to be an early riser, that maybe you're finished with your workday by the time everybody else in your office is about halfway through their workday. It depends on where and how and what the time difference is. But there are some people who do enjoy being able to get up early, 5, 6 o'clock, and finish in the mid-afternoon, early afternoon, and they have the rest of their day. And they love that aspect of living that digital nomad expat lifestyle, working remotely, because it gives them that freedom to be able to work like they would at home, but have a beautiful, wonderful setting around them like Italy. What a better place to have as your backdrop. But this will be the other thing, is that are you okay with getting up early or working late into the night? Is that something that works for you? Or maybe something that I've had to do at various times in my work career is work on a rotating sleep schedule that basically whenever something is needed, that I just have to be available and awake at that time, and then just get sleep whenever you get sleep. And definitely lockdown would be one of those situations where if you're not going out anyway, then maybe that makes it a little easier for you. But for anybody considering this lifestyle, hopefully that won't be a concern for too much longer so that we can all get on with the rest of our lives here. Having your life on pause for more than a year now, definitely not fun, as I'm sure all of you are very much on board with. Another part of this time difference that you'll have to think about will be if you have to have meetings or phone meetings, Zoom meetings, whatever it might be, to have communication. Or is email or WhatsApp good enough to be able to, or Slack even, is that good enough to be able to keep in contact and just have those little messages here and there, just to kind of do that little upkeep, because you can do your thing and they can do their things, and the cogs in the wheels, they just keep on turning, and maybe you only have to have a meeting once every few months to really keep that machine well oiled. For some people, that does work. In some positions, you need to have regular daily contact. And I know that there are some people, even here in Italy, who work for American companies or American businesses and organizations, and they will spend a good portion of their day on Zoom because that's just necessary for their job. But with the situation, how it's been in America, and with so many people not working in their offices, that would be the situation anyway. And it's something interesting that this past year has really shown, is that some of these office spaces and co-working spaces are just so unnecessary. Yeah, okay, it's nice maybe if you're in a co-working space and you're all doing startups, that you can all kind of bounce ideas off each other and talk to each other and have that communication. But is it truly necessary for the work that you're doing? And maybe, is it more worthwhile actually working from home? But that's something that also comes into play. Balancing your workspace with your living space. Are you working from your bed? Are you working from your kitchen table? Is that something that you can handle having to break down and put up at each day when you have to start work, or just leave it out? And are you willing to live with that space taken over by that thing? Or are you in the position where maybe that you can actually have a separate bedroom and a separate living space and a separate office space, that will be something else that can make a huge impact on just your mental state and being able to work from home. Because when you have that crossover between them, that can really start getting to you. And even you might not realize it until after you've already made that change in your life, that, wow, getting my computer out of my sleeping space can make a huge difference. And that's something that I've definitely had happen, where for a lot of my career, working from my sleeping space has been just required. Just having had positions where I've been able to choose not to work in an office space, or realizing that sometimes an office space would cost me more. And hey, I may as well spend a little extra time at home. But that hasn't necessarily been my whole career. There's been points where that has been true and when that hasn't been true. And fortunately, unfortunately, it's not possible for everybody in all types of positions, but there are a lot of jobs out there that do allow a person to work remotely. Basically, at the end of the day, a good portion of desk jobs out there can be done from home. But this leads to another point, kind of what I was talking about before. Like, maybe you could be relaxing on the beach and just drinking your whatever it is that you want to drink and having an internet connection. If you're in some place that's close to the sea, maybe you'll be able to find a location that has great fiber internet, but you might be stuck in a place that's out in the middle of nowhere. And because you love that, just that feeling of being out without so many people around you, that can leave you a little disconnected, whether it's through a cellular signal or through a wired connection. There are people here, even in Italy, who use satellite internet, and I know that they can find that type of situation annoying, but it's a lifesaver for many people who need to be able to work online, but live in a place where that's not even feasible. So are there options? Yes, and you just have to explore those options for where it is that you're going to be living, because there will be some places that might only have DSL. There might be some places with dial-up even still. There might be some places that will have fiber optic internet. It depends on the type of place that you're looking at. And in Italy, you do have a lot of places when you get to more of the major cities, and especially the capitals of the regions and the provinces, those will be more likely to have fiber internet connections. So if you're considering to do the digital nomad thing or working from home but living abroad, then that's something you should definitely take into consideration, because that may affect your ability to earn an income. And if you can't have that income because the internet is down, what kind of situation is that going to leave you in? So that's another thing to consider, is how important is that internet connection and how reliable is that internet connection where you'll be moving? But then maybe on some of the more social aspects of it, like I was talking about before, there can be that work-life balance that will be difficult to balance depending on whether you're sleeping during the day or during the night, or you're waking up very early or you're going to sleep very late. Depending on what type of schedule you might not need to keep, that could directly affect the type of life that you can live socially. But of course, this is again under the assumption that this will be more for when life is back to some semblance of normal, when you can go out and do these things. In many parts of the world, yeah, people are living life semi-normally, but here in Italy, we definitely aren't living life normally at this point in time. But if you are considering that you would like to go out after work with your friends and enjoy a drink with them on the piazza or on the plaza, where whatever country you're in, whatever the social system is like there, not social system, but how things work socially, I should say, can be impacted by when you are available yourself. So is it that you're having to work on a schedule that would make it maybe from 6 p.m. to 1 a.m. that you're packed, you're busy, you can't do anything during that time when many people might choose to go out? Or are you able to work during the day and have that flexible work schedule that all that's important is that you get your work done, not necessarily when you get it done? That's a big thing to consider if you are trying to make that transition with your current job, and to talk to them about that and say, hey, does it matter if it's a specific time that I need to get this done? Or is it only important that I accomplish the tasks at hand? Maybe if you are an assistant and your boss needs you directly to be available at that time when they're working, then that might not work so much. or you'll have to make yourself available during that time, which could be the middle of the night for you, depending on where you are and where your boss might be. But then another social aspect is your friends and your family back in your home country, or your family wherever they may be in the world. When we're talking about friends, this is something that, of course, over a person's life, it's natural for people to grow apart and literally move apart. And this is one thing that when you are living abroad can be very much a part of your life, that your friend group just may not end up staying as that same group of people that you knew back in the States, in your country, wherever it is you're from, because you are growing in a different direction and becoming planted and rooted in a new country while they are growing off in that other direction where they have their life there. Maybe they're having kids and they're really setting down those roots, but maybe you've chosen not to do that. Or maybe you've chosen to bring your kids with you, and you and your kids are now setting roots in this new country, but your kids being raised in this new place will have this different cultural influence that maybe their friends won't be getting, and they will naturally grow apart. Maybe later on, as the years go on, they'll be able to come back together and come back like cousins almost and say, hey, it's great seeing you. It's wonderful. This is fantastic. See you again in a few years. But this is something that it's a part of the life. And so you shouldn't expect necessarily that you will be able to keep your same friends, your same group of friends. Maybe it is possible. There are people out there who keep those best friends, and they will stay best friends no matter where they are on earth, just because that's the type of friendship that they have. Some friendships are beyond space and time, but some actually do require that personal interaction. But with this past year, we've been learning a lot about how that can be affected. And even I know a lot of people who they've been very much re-exploring their social circles and their social groups and realizing that maybe some of those friends that they had before were only bar friends, or maybe some of those friends were only cafe friends, or maybe only restaurant friends, or work friends. Some of those people that you might have had those connections with before. But with family, that is something that for many people, I would say even most people, could be a very make or break situation. Maybe is it that your parents are elderly and that they need help, or they might need help in a couple of years? Or do you have children and you want them to get to know their grandparents? This can be something that can really affect your decision and even lifestyle, because there will be those ups and there will be those downs, and your support system around you will make a huge difference in the way that you can get through your daily life. And there will be those times when living abroad, it doesn't matter if you speak the language perfectly or if you don't speak the language perfectly, you may feel isolated. You may go through those moments of saying, hey, I don't feel like I'm necessarily a part of this moment. Even recently, the interview that I uploaded with Miss Brittany, aka Claire, this was something that we spoke about, being in those social situations where maybe people are speaking so fast in Italian that maybe you miss a little something here and there, and you can't quite take that full participation in the conversation, maybe in the way that you would really like to. So anyway, be sure to go check that out. And of course, thank you all again so much for joining me on another Friday night. And of course, another huge thank you to those of you who help make content like this possible on a monthly basis through Patreon, patreon.com/RafaelDiFuria or RafaelDiFuria.com/Patreon. And of course, thank you to those of you who are subscribed to this project on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any of the other podcasting platforms out there. All of your support is greatly appreciated. Of course, if you are on YouTube watching this, please be sure to give the video a like and share it with your friends. That would be greatly appreciated because it does help out the channel. Or if you're on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to leave a 5-star rating. And if you've enjoyed this episode or past episodes or found them helpful, be sure to let me know that in a written review. And of course, as always, I'm Rafael Difuria. Thank you for joining me on another Friday night. Stay safe, stay healthy. I look forward to seeing you all next time. Have a great one. Later.